feel good. Of course, you always want to move up, but this is a draft that we like. We like the depth of it. There's good players all throughout the lottery, so we'll be just fine where we landed. As we study this more and more, it's looking like it's quality throughout. So I think depth, it looks good at the top, of course, but the depth is also a strong suit. Always want to be open-minded. We'll do our due diligence, do a lap around the league and see what's available, but, we'll also focus heavily on, okay, this player's another addition that we can make to this team. I always hope to approach and go through the draft taking the best player available. I hope we don't deviate, but need is on our mind. Like we think about, okay, what exact types of guys do we need to add? But I think the draft is mostly grab the best player available and then figure it out after that.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 154 of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino, a special draft lottery edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. I am Casey Holdahl, and that was Trailblazers General Manager Joe Cronin discussing the Trailblazers not getting lucky at the 2025 NBA Draft Lottery. Portland Trailblazers had the 10th best odds of moving up to get the first, second, third, or fourth pick, and had the best odds of finishing with the 10th overall pick. Unfortunately, they ended up with the 11th pick, the Dallas Mavericks jumping all the way back from way behind the Trailblazers with less than a 2% chance to win the first pick in the NBA Draft Lottery, pushing the Trailblazers back one spot to the 11th pick. We'll talk about the NBA Draft Lottery. We'll talk about the idea of luck and whether or not the Trailblazers have it or not. We'll discuss some of the workouts they've been having at the practice facility in Tualatin to prepare for the upcoming 2025 NBA Draft. And we'll talk about not winning the draft lottery and how that makes you feel, and going through the paces and trying to do things the right way, and whether or not that even matters on this edition of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, if you have not yet heard, I did just say it, Trailblazers did not win the draft lottery, did not get lucky at the draft lottery, didn't move up at all in the draft lottery, didn't only not get the first overall pick, or the second, or the third, or the fourth. They didn't even get the pick they were most likely to get, the 10th pick. They ended up with the 11th pick, which I think they had like 15 or 20% chance of getting, seeing as how some teams did leapfrog the Trailblazers to get into the top spots in the draft lottery. Let's just go ahead and run down real fast the now decided 2025 NBA lottery, or excuse me, NBA draft order. Dallas Mavericks, as I mentioned, with 1.7% chance of getting the top pick, bucked the odds after trading Luka Doncic to Los Angeles to get the overall pick. Everyone's suspecting they will take Cooper Flagg out of Duke with that pick, which I think is a fairly safe assumption, though I don't think anyone would have assumed they were going to trade Luka Doncic. So, maybe they decided to go a different direction there. But either way, the Dallas Mavericks getting rewarded with the top overall pick. San Antonio Spurs get the second pick. They got a whole lot going on down there in San Antonio. Another chance to add a really nice player to an already fantastic young core. Philadelphia 76ers end up getting to keep their pick by finishing third. Does not go to Oklahoma City Thunder, which would have been, I don't know if I'd say disastrous for the 76ers, but they could definitely use some talent right now as their team starts to get older, I would say. So they use some young talent. So the Sixers end up with the third overall pick, Hornets in fourth, Utah Jazz in fifth, Washington Wizards in sixth, Pelicans in seventh, Nets in eighth, Raptors in ninth, Rockets in 10th, which is the Suns pick that just goes to the Rockets by virtue of some trade at some point in time. Blazers end up with the 11th overall pick, 12 for the Chicago Bulls, 13 for the Atlanta Hawks, and 12 for the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs with 2 picks in the lottery, though 14th is barely a lottery pick at this point. So the Trailblazers, as I mentioned, had a I believe it was around a 13% chance of getting into the top four. I believe a 3.8% chance of getting the top overall pick. Did not get either one of those. According to Ben Golliver at the Washington Post, once again, the Trailblazers were just one number off from getting the first pick. If the last number had been a sixth, according to Ben, the Blazers would have gotten the overall pick. I believe it was 7, and it goes to the Mavericks. The Wizards would have gotten it if it was 1. That also, according to Ben, is also what happened in the Wemby draft as well. Blazers were 1 number permutation away from getting that pick. The way it works is, every team is assigned a certain number of numbers, and when those combinations come up, that team gets that pick, which is why they only do it for the top four picks. It's not for the entire lottery, which is what I always say when I'm talking about the NBA draft lottery. But either way, Trailblazers not even getting the pick they had the best odds to get, and that is actually the third time in the last four seasons that the Trailblazers have underperformed their lottery odds. Which, when you couple that with the fact that we keep losing coin flips over and over and over again, really does make you wonder a little bit how if the Trailblazers do have a little bit of an unlucky streak. I don't tend to really believe in those kind of things, but when it happens over and over and over again, I can understand how people would maybe start to question a little bit whether or not the world is fair. Well, actually, we know the world's not fair. I mean, there's no argument about that. But whether it's specifically unfair to the Portland Trailblazers and their fans, I would hope not. And the Blazers, they got some good things going for them. I've already seen a fair amount of discussion that, like, well, if the Blazers did a better job of tanking, maybe they get one of those spots. Which I know that everyone's always going to have second guesses, but considering the Jazz and the Wizards, two teams that lost way more than the Blazers this year, end up with the fifth and sixth picks. Same with the Pelicans, end up with the seventh overall pick. I if I was going to say anything that was like assuming that luck is real and that bad things happen to good people or whatever you want to say, the Blazers did ethically tank this year. I mean, they tried to win games. As we talked about over and over and over again, there was an assumption this year that the Blazers were just going to come out and not try to win games. And those of us who, follow the team closely, who talk to people who know these kind of things, told you over and over again, no, they're going to play to win this year, and they did, and they played to win up until the end of the season. If they had lost the last game of the year versus, I think it was San Antonio, they would have not tied with the Spurs or with the Suns, meaning they would have got the ninth overall best odds, which in this case, if everything stayed the same, means they would have gotten the ninth overall pick. Now, granted, nine is better than 11, but it's not that much better than 11. So, but that was one thing that, if they had lost that game, conceivably that would have put them in a better draft position, and they didn't. And that was something that they just didn't do this year. They decided that, we're gonna try to start to play this thing like we want to see this team get better and grow, and it's hard to get better. And I think it's hard to make progress when you're going out there not trying to win, when you're purposefully going out there trying to lose. And the Blazers didn't do that this year. And while, they didn't get rewarded in the draft lottery, you would hope that they are going to be rewarded in terms of the growth of their team, which, I think, there's some cause to believe that the Blazers, did really make some progress this year, particularly on the defensive end. I think they have a much better idea now of kind of who their core pieces are on the team right now going forward, where they probably need to still address some areas. Guys who they can probably, want to keep around, guys who they are probably willing to part with if given the opportunity or the right deal at least. So, they did get some things accomplished this year, but one of those things was not losing so many games that you could get one of the top four picks. And again, the Mavericks didn't either, and they get rewarded with the top pick. The Blazers, I think, lost one more game or one or two more games than the Spurs. Spurs get the second pick. So that's just how those things work out. But a bummer for sure. Like I think it is perfectly reasonable to be disappointed that the Trailblazers weren't able to, again, not even get the first pick, but just move up at all, and not even just move up, but just stay in the spot that they had the best chance of getting. So, when you had the Donovan Clingan draft, and I think that in the Clingan draft. So in the Clingan draft, I believe they had the best odds to get sixth, and they got seventh. In the Shaden draft, I think that was the one where they had maybe five and ended up with seven. Either way, both the Klingon and the Shaden Sharp drafts, Blazers underperformed their lottery odds in those drafts. In the Scoot draft, I think they had one of the three worst records and ended up with the third pick. So, they didn't improve, they didn't get lucky, but they did basically stay where they were at. And they hadn't been in the lottery before that since but it had been some time. The Blazers had made the playoffs for all those years consecutively, and when you make the playoffs, you don't go to the draft lottery. So the Blazers now with the 11th pick in the upcoming draft at the end of June. Team is, or most of the team, at least the decision makers, the front office is in Chicago right now, where the draft lottery took place to take part in the NBA draft combine. Quite a few players working out at the combine. The front office will be going through interviews, getting testing done for players, medical and psychological testing. The top guys, I think, usually if you're a guy who's going, if you feel like you're a first round guy, you're probably not playing at the combine. But if you're a guy who's maybe like a borderline second round guy and you're hoping to get into the first round, um, those are the guys that generally do end up playing at the combine. I believe you can watch the workouts at the draft combine ESPN Plus. So the Blazers front office, they're now doing their due diligence in preparation. Then I believe there's probably a few agent pro days that are coming up here sometime in the next couple weeks. And the way those work is rather than having players go to your facility to participate in workouts, some agents will basically take their clients and just put on workouts at their gym. A lot of times in Los Angeles, just so that way you don't have to have guys going all over the place. And sometimes those guys will go out for workouts after the fact, but at least you get an opportunity to see everyone kind of in the same place in an environment they're comfortable with. And then after that, then I believe the NBA, or excuse me, the Blazers will continue with their NBA draft workouts at the facility in Tualatin. They've already held two workouts last week on Tuesday and Thursday. I think it'll probably be a couple more weeks. At least I would say probably till the end of May until they hold more of those workouts at their own facility. Now that they have the 11th pick, 11th is a little bit tough to, I think, probably get workouts with guys because if you have guys who feel like they're top 10 guys, they don't want to work out for teams outside of the top 10. And so you're basically at that point looking at guys who are in the 11 to probably 25 range who are trying to get closer to the top 10 who are probably willing to work out for you. So I'll be curious to see what players they're able to get for workouts, whether or not those are solo workouts. Round 10 is where I feel like you can probably start to make a few more requests of the guys that are coming through town, particularly to have them play in group workouts. I think generally teams would prefer to see you play against other players. Now, in a 3-on-3, it's still 3-on-3, so you're not getting exactly a great opportunity to kind of see what they would look like in game action. But when you have a group workout, as I've talked about before, it does give teams the opportunity to basically bring in that player and then maybe have some other players that you're throwing at that player who are maybe going to test some of the questions you have about that player. So, for example, if you're bringing in a shooter 2-3 guy who you feel pretty good about his range, but you've seen that he's had some trouble versus lanky defenders getting his shot off from three, particularly from the corners, say. And so in that kind of situation, you would want to bring in another guy into that workout who was a lanky defender to see like, okay, how does this guy who we have this question about, like, how does he do when we kind of set up a scenario in which we can get a more opportunity to see how you deal with those kind of situations. And so, when you're talking about the 11th pick, I think that you maybe have a little more ability to define what that workout's going to look like. You probably have a little bit less ability getting in some of the guys who maybe you're hoping to see in if there's a guy in the 5, 6, 7, 8 range, is he going to come work out for a team with the 11th overall pick? I don't know. Some guys do. Some guys just like the competition. Some guys want to go out and prove themselves. But more and more, I feel like it's more about kind of preserving the notion of who you are as a player and less about proving it. And if you're just trying to preserve something, the easiest way to do that most of the time is to just not do anything. So that generally has been the direction that things have gone as of late in terms of those pre-draft workouts. One of the nice things I will say, I mean, there's all kinds of nice things. I feel like the Blazers throughout the years have done a really good job with their pre-draft work. But the Blazers are still having public pre-draft workouts. That's not to say you get to watch the players work out, but at least they're saying, "Hey, we're having a workout. This is who's coming in." More and more teams now aren't even doing that. So, which also I just it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because everyone already knows anyway. So the people that need to know, the people that you wouldn't want knowing if guys were coming in for workouts for you, they know anyways. So like, so what I'm saying is like, so say you're Utah Jazz. My understanding is Utah Jazz don't publicize their workouts anymore. They don't say who they've had come in. And so Jazz fans don't know that. Journalists, for the most part, probably won't know that. But other front office guys are going to know that because they're going to call up that player's agent and say, where else have you worked out at? Or they're going to just hear about it because they're doing a lot of intel this time of year. So in that scenario, the only people that are really getting cut out are the fans and the journalists who are covering these things. And I know for me personally, draft coverage always does really well. Blazers fans love the draft. They love the notion of what could be. They love young players. And so it's really nice to be able to cover these workouts and cover the draft in a way that gets your fan base excited about, these players going forward. And, a lot of other places aren't doing that anymore. So the fact that the Blazers are still one of the teams that are holding those workouts, kudos to you guys. Shout out to you, Joe Cronin, and your staff for not just putting everything under wraps, which, teams can do now, I guess. But again, I don't think you really get a whole lot out of that other than you don't have a whole lot of like the public might not know, but the people who are in the need to know in the NBA, the general managers, the assistant general managers, the scouts, personnel guys, they do know where all those guys worked out. So what are you really earning out of that? Or what are you getting that's of substantive value? I don't know. You do get a chance to kind of talk about some of the players who might be on your team going forward when you do have workouts, and I think it also helps to the process. I think I think when you can see your team going through the paces in order to prepare themselves for the draft, I think that allows you to be like, yeah, like they're doing the things that they should be doing. They're putting forth the proper effort and due diligence in order to prepare themselves for any instance at the draft. I think that's what you want to see as a fan. Speaking of instances at the draft, as I mentioned, they have had two workouts already. Most of all the players, except for two players in those workouts, were early entry candidates. A few of the players did say that they're not going to go back to school. If they are going to stick in the draft, usually say you're an early entry guy because you can just preserve that right. And if you're in a workout and you get injured in a workout, you can still go back to school. That's better than just coming out saying declaring I'm going to the NBA. And if you roll an ankle in the workout process, not able to work out, you're maybe a fringe second round guy. You're trying to work your way up, but you can't go through workouts anymore because you're injured. Those are the guys that probably go back to school. And the reason I mention that is because of all the players they've had come in so far, and they've had 12 players that they've announced that have come through. All of those players have been second round guys, basically, at least at this point in time in the process. Now, the reason you have a draft process, a workout process, is for the players especially, is they want to work their way up, and the opportunity to maybe go from again being a kind of a fringe guy to a drafted guy does happen. Going from being kind of a late or undrafted second round guy to a first round guy through workouts, that's a bit uncommon. But what I'm getting at is that the Blazers don't have a second round pick this year. So all of the players that they've had come in so far for workouts, the two workouts that they've had, have all basically been guys who are projected to go second round or undrafted. But even though the Blazers don't have a second round pick, they're still working those players out because they want to be ready if the opportunity arises to get a second round pick, most likely, and then use it on one of those players. And so even though you don't necessarily know how the draft's going to play out, you have to be prepared for all kinds of scenarios. And the Blazers do that by way of having workouts, even though those players might not necessarily be in their range for where they're drafting at, which I think one goes to show that the draft is a living thing and it's happening in real time, and you want to be prepared in order to give yourself the best chance to take advantage if an opportunity does arise. And that's why you really go through the paces in the pre-draft process. That's why, the draft process too starts years and years and years before these guys are draft eligible, because you want to have a good book on a lot of these guys and know exactly kind of what you're getting into, or know the best you can of what you're getting into, with the data available. And it also shows that, you're going through, again, you're making sure that if those things happen, that you're ready. And I also think, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily read it as the Blazers are looking for a second round pick because they've brought in second round pick guys. But it's a possibility. So I think that it's important to be prepared for those kind of things, which is why I think the way that the Blazers run their pre-draft and the fact they've already had workouts prior to the draft lottery, despite not having a second round pick, bringing in guys who are more second round talents. I think that again, that just goes to show the diligence they put in. Also, too, it should be stated as well that a lot of those workouts are for summer league guys as well. Like sometimes you're looking to fill out your summer league roster. A lot of times it'll be with guys who aren't drafted. In fact, the majority of your summer league team are guys who are not drafted. And so those kind of workouts, I think, are a chance to see some guys. And if those guys do end up deciding to stay in the draft and declare, and if they don't end up getting drafted, then, maybe guys that you put on your summer league team once that time comes in July. So plenty of business getting squared away for the Trailblazers, even if they weren't able to get lucky today. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Briefcase. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, once again, Trailblazers ending up with the 11th overall pick at the 2025 NBA Draft. It is the only pick the Trailblazers have so far. One first-round pick, no second-round picks for the Trailblazers. Their second rounder is, I think, the Raptors have it by way of the Kings. I have no idea how it got there in the first place. That was probably from trade years and years. Maybe was that the Gary Payton trade? Again, impossible to follow some of those second round picks. First round picks are usually pretty easy to track where they came from and how. Second rounders, good luck. I mean, I'm sure you can probably look up a transaction page somewhere, but long story short, doesn't even really matter anyways. Blazers only have one pick, the 11th overall pick, by way of falling back one spot at the 2025 NBA Draft Lottery. And that's going to do it for this edition. We will talk later this week. As I mentioned, workouts probably not happening, at least in Tualatin, for maybe a couple other weeks now, or at least more additional workouts. But once they do, things will really get heating up. This will definitely be a spot where we'll be talking about those throughout the off season. More stuff will come up as well, as I'm sure. We'll talk about the playoffs next time. It's been an incredibly interesting second round, and proof that sometimes you just got to get to the playoffs. You don't necessarily have to be a favorite. You don't necessarily have to win 60 games in order to have success. You just got to get there and play well when you do, and hopefully stay healthy, and you give yourself a chance. So we'll talk about that. We will talk more about the draft and the Portland Trailblazers, and probably a few things that I've forgotten about or that will hopefully come up in between. So thank you as always for joining me. I'm Casey Holdahl. You've been watching The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Go Blazers.